During the 1st century BC through the 2nd century AD, Rome was not only the capital of the greatest known empire, it was the beating heart of the ancient world. Cosmopolitan, overcrowded, and technically advanced, it drew merchants, soldiers, artists, slaves, philosophers, and opportunists from every corner of the Mediterranean. Sources like Strabo and Dionysius of Halicarnassus describe a vibrant city packed with monumental buildings and bustling markets, with a population that may have surpassed 1 million at the height of the Pax Romana. But behind the triumphal arches and public baths, there was another Rome, noisy, dirty, unequal, a place where living could be a privilege and often a punishment. Today you'll discover what it was like to live in Rome during its golden age. Rome grew faster than it could organize itself. Every decade more people arrived, peasants seeking bread, veterans hoping for rewards, immigrants dreaming of citizenship. The result was overcrowding, chaos, and a housing crisis unlike anything the ancient world had seen. By the 2nd century AD, according to the Regio Urbis and writers like Suetonius, the city might hold up to 1 million inhabitants. That number didn't mean comfort. It meant improvisation. Most people were crammed into insulae, multi-story blocks built of brick and cheap concrete. From a distance, they looked imposing. Inside, they were traps. The architect Vitruvius, in his treatise on architecture, warned of their risks: unstable, quick to catch fire, liable to collapse without warning. In AD 64, the Great Fire under Nero exposed just how fragile they were. Whole streets turned to ash in hours. Each insula was carved into tiny units, rooms without windows, without latrines, and almost never with running water. The lower floors, more expensive, housed families with some means. The upper floors, cheaper, required climbing narrow, hazardous stairs and offered little more than stifling heat in summer and damp cold in winter. A single candle's spark could spell disaster. Meanwhile, the elite lived in another universe. The domus, single-family houses with interior courtyards, gardens, and colonnades, offered comfort, space, and privacy. With large dining rooms, libraries, frescoed salons, and even private baths, they embodied the social abyss separating common citizens from aristocrats. Even so, these mansions had to yield to Rome's tight topography. Hills, alleys, and noisy neighborhoods put limits on urban luxury. Many preferred suburban villas, far from the clamor, with views of the countryside and the scent of quiet. That urban inequality shaped daily life. One neighbor might live among marble columns while, a few meters away, another slept under a wooden roof ready to cave in. Rome was a city where physical proximity concealed vast social distances. And amid it all, there was one place where rich and poor stood side by side, towels in hand and sweat on their faces, the public baths. The first large bath complexes appeared in the 1st century BC, like Agrippa's. Then came true cathedrals of bathing, the baths of Trajan, Caracalla, and Diocletian. Marble monuments with giant columns, vaulted ceilings, and mosaics telling mythological stories. Most impressive of all, they were open to the public. Admission was cheap or even free, funded by emperors or patrons in search of prestige. The bath followed a near-choreographed route. First, the body was rubbed with perfumed oil, then scraped clean with a curved blade called a strigil to remove sweat and grime. After that came the rooms, the warm tepidarium, the searing caldarium, and finally the frigidarium for an icy shock. There were also dry steam rooms, laconicum, libraries, exercise areas, and gardens for rest. The wealthy arrived with slaves to carry towels, prepare oils, and adjust water temperature. The poor did everything themselves, yet still enjoyed the same facilities. Once Emperor Hadrian saw an elderly veteran struggling to wash, and in an unexpected gesture, assigned him one of his own slaves. Emperor and common soldier united by the bath. The baths were also a stage for business, gossip, and conspiracy. Deals were closed there. Rumors spread in hopes of reaching the right ears. Early on, bathing was mixed. Hadrian later banned the practice, separating the sexes for the sake of decorum. By the 2nd century, Rome boasted more than 800 public baths of all sizes, a sign of how much bodily care and the appearance of civilization formed part of the Roman soul. Keeping clothing clean outside the bath was another matter. And here enters one of the city's strangest and most lucrative industries. To dress well was mandatory for any Roman who wanted to be taken seriously. Spotless togas, white tunics, unstained cloaks. Appearance signaled status, but with dusty streets, constant sweat, and no washing machines, keeping garments clean was a real feat. Enter a vital and frankly repellent profession. The fuller, Rome's launderer. Fullers didn't just clean clothes, they restored a garment's dignity. Their methods, though, make modern noses curl. The main ingredient was urine. Yes, urine, rich in ammonia, a powerful alkaline agent ideal for lifting grease, dirt, and odors from fabric. The city placed public jars for urination at strategic points. Professionals or enterprising collectors gathered the contents. Legal and profitable. In the Fulonicae, fuller's workshops, urine was mixed with water and poured into large stone vats. Workers climbed in and stomped the cloth with their feet in a long, rhythmic, absolutely essential process. Pliny the Elder describes these practices in his Natural History, and inscriptions in Pompeii preserve the names and services of local fullers. Proof it was a respected trade despite the stench. No one profited more from it than Emperor Vespasian, who instituted the vectigal urinae, a tax on urine. Those who collected from public jars paid tribute. When his son Titus mocked the measure, Vespasian lifted a coin to his nose and said, "Pecunia non olet," money doesn't stink. Fulleries were usually set beyond noble districts for obvious reasons. Near markets, workshops, and busy zones, they operated day and night. But if the smell there was bad, the city's streets could be worse. At first glance, the capital's roads seemed an engineering marvel, and they were. Main streets were paved with large blocks of volcanic basalt, graded for drainage with curbs and defined sidewalks. One could leave the city and reach the empire's edges without ever stepping off a Roman road. Inside the city, though, things were different. As entire neighborhoods grew unchecked, urban streets became a chaotic maze. Narrow lanes, sharp turns, dead ends, and passages barely wide enough for a cart. The hilly terrain forced stairways, ramps, bridges, and makeshift tunnels. Rome wasn't planned, it simply grew. By day, the noise was deafening. Juvenal, in his Satires, complains of constant racket, squealing wheels, hammer blows, shouting vendors. Cicero speaks of the difficulty of sleeping in Rome amid the nighttime din, and he wasn't exaggerating. To ease the chaos, Julius Caesar banned daytime cart traffic, which only shifted the problem to night. While the wealthy tried to sleep in their domus, the insulae shook with the roar of iron tires on stone. Buildings had no soundproofing, windows sealed nothing. Noise, like smell, was part of everyday life. Streets also deteriorated fast. Constant traffic shattered paving, opening potholes and creating real hazards for pedestrians and animals. To cross flooded or muddy roads, people used raised stepping stones, primitive crosswalks still visible in Pompeii. And even amid the disorder, there was a system. The Lex Julia Municipalis, from Augustus's time, regulated everything from minimum street widths to permitted construction types by district. Some corners bore mosaics indicating neighborhoods or building functions, a rudimentary but functional zoning. What truly kept Rome standing, though, wasn't wars, money, or emperors. It was water. And incredibly, beneath that seemingly chaotic surface lay one of antiquity's most sophisticated sanitation systems. The Cloaca Maxima, begun in the regal period in the 6th century BC, started as an open channel to drain the forum's marshes. Over time, it expanded and was covered, becoming a genuine underground tunnel. At the empire's height, it linked public latrines, drainage channels, even bathhouses, and carried it all to the Tiber. If the sewers were the exit, clean water was the entrance. And there Rome outdid itself. The aqueducts were engineering miracles, carrying water from distant springs, sometimes more than 60 kilometers away, by an exquisitely precise system of gravity. The Aqua Claudia, built under Claudius and Nero, is a monumental example, crossing hills and valleys on elevated arcades, all calculated to the millimeter to maintain the perfect gradient. That water supplied public fountains, baths, latrines, and, with luck, a few wealthy homes. Lead pipes, fistulae plumbae, brought water into domus, but they were costly and limited. Most Romans relied on public fountains, cisterns, and reservoirs. And when it came time to use the toilet, privacy was the first thing to disappear. Public latrines were large rooms with side-by-side stone seats, no partitions. Beneath the benches, a constant stream of water carried waste away. Instead of toilet paper, people used a sponge on a stick, the tersorium, rinsed in water with vinegar, shared, functional, and terrifying. For all the system's efficiency, open drains still existed. Water was often contaminated and stench was unavoidable. Galen, the famed Greek physician who practiced in Rome, warned about diseases caused by foul air and the fetid damp rising from alleyways. Yet despite the risks, this infrastructure allowed something extraordinary, a gigantic metropolis to stay alive and relatively stable. No other ancient city came close. If water sustained Rome's body, spectacle sustained its soul. Life in Rome was hard, but entertainment was guaranteed. For an empire built on blood and discipline, amusement was relief, and more than that, it was politics. Panem et circenses, as Juvenal wrote, bread and circuses, the simple formula that kept the people content and obedient. No place symbolized it better than the Colosseum. The Flavian Amphitheater, inaugurated by Titus in 80 AD, was more than a stadium. It was a symbol of imperial power. With capacity for up to 80,000, its travertine arches welcomed crowds hungry for blood, sweat, and glory. There unfolded the spectacles that shaped the Roman imagination: gladiatorial combat, exotic animal hunts, venationes, public executions, and even mock naval battles, namachiae, with the arena temporarily flooded. Most astonishing, admission was free. Magistrates and emperors bankrolled the shows in exchange for political favor. Whoever paid for the spectacle harvested the crowd's goodwill. But Rome didn't live on gladiators alone. The city had stone theaters too, the theaters of Pompey, of Marcellus, of Balbus, modeled on Greek designs with semicircular seating, excellent acoustics, and plays ranging from epic tragedy to vulgar comedy. Many texts carried political undertones. There the people laughed or booed. And at the Circus Maximus, the entertainment was pure speed and danger. Chariot races, teams, blues and greens, drove the crowd to delirium. Stands holding up to 150,000 shook with screams, wagers, and rivalries that sometimes ended in real brawls. It wasn't rare for fans to be trampled by animals or crushed by the mob. On show days, the city stopped. Stalls closed, children left school, and people filled the seats to the rhythm of drums and trumpets. The empire offered its greatest product, distraction. While the crowds roared, Another part of society grew backstage with little access to laughter and everything to lose: children. In Rome, childhood was brief and schooling even more limited. There were no public schools or state education system. Everything depended on a family's means, and above all, the child's gender. In the earliest years, learning began at home. The pater familias was the primary educator, teaching sons to read, write, count, and above all, to behave as Roman citizens: obedient, disciplined, virile. Girls learned from their mothers to sew, run the household, and prepare for marriage, which could come in adolescence. Wealthy families hired private tutors. The pedagogy, often cultured Greek slaves, to accompany children to lessons, watch their behavior, and reinforce studies. Classes could take place anywhere, under porticos, in public squares, or in rented rooms. The point was to learn and to endure punishment, which was not uncommon. The curriculum followed 3 stages. In the ludus literarius, a child learned reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. Next, the Grammaticus introduced the classics: Homer, Virgil, Ennius. The third level, reserved for the few, was the rhetor, where students mastered oratory and persuasion, indispensable for any political career. Girls rarely progressed beyond basic literacy. Since they did not participate in public life, formal education was deemed unnecessary. Only in the richest homes do we find educated women, sometimes even versed in philosophy or poetry. Archaeology reveals a sparse childhood: ivory dolls with jointed limbs, dice, spinning tops. Evidence there was time to play, though little of it. From age 12, boys might work, train for the army, or assume civic duties. Girls at that age were often already betrothed. All this unfolded against a backdrop of very high child mortality. Epidemics, malnutrition, accidents, and disease made childhood something many treated with a certain emotional restraint. Even so, not every fate was fixed. Some girls, especially those entering religious life, could take unexpected paths. In ancient Rome, being born a woman meant living under rules, nearly all written by men. Women could not vote, hold public office, or speak in court. Legally, they were always under someone's guardianship: father, husband, or in some cases, even their own son. That didn't mean all women lived the same way. A woman's experience was shaped by 3 factors: social status, wealth, and the male authority over her. A wealthy woman, a matrona, could live relatively comfortably, directing slaves, overseeing the home, administering property, and taking part in religious cults. Some even stood out in political circles through their influence over powerful husbands or sons. Livia, wife of Augustus; Agrippina, mother of Nero. Poor women, by contrast, had to work. Many were vendors, midwives, launderers, farmhands, or artisans. Some contributed directly to family income in markets, workshops, or on the streets. Their routines were exhausting and their social space limited. Others found power in the sacred. The most respected priestesses were the Vestal Virgins, chosen as girls to serve the goddess Vesta. For 30 years they lived in celibacy, tending the sacred fire. They received honors and privileges, could administer inheritances, free prisoners, ride in chariots. Any lapse, such as losing virginity, was punished by being buried alive. There were also women on the margins: registered prostitutes, meretrices, working in regulated brothels, lupanaria, or in tolerated districts. Some were slaves forced into it, others free women fleeing family control at the cost of their status. Stigmatized, yes, but an active part of urban life. Despite restrictions, Roman history shows women who quietly left their mark. Julia Domna, wife of Septimius Severus, a patron of philosophers; Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi, symbol of republican virtue. Many others, nameless, lived between the lines of law and necessity, adapting to survive. Above all, the Roman woman was the household's pillar, the family's spiritual and moral center. Within that domestic sphere, another deep aspect emerges: everyday religion. Religion wasn't a choice. It was a civic, family, and personal obligation. At home, the most intimate worship was for the Lares and Penates, guardian deities of family and hearth. Small shrines, Lararia, stood near the kitchen or at the house entrance, where the paterfamilias led rituals, offerings of wine, incense, bits of bread, or fruit. To secure ancestral protection, pantry prosperity, and everyone's health under that roof. Skipping a ritual or offending a spirit could bring misfortune. Outside the home, public cults were grander. Temples to Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Juno, and others dotted the urban landscape. On the Capitoline Hill, the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus was the symbolic heart of the city. Under Augustus, a new dimension was added: the imperial cult. After Julius Caesar's deification and Augustus's death, worship of the emperor as a divus, a god, became common. Altars rose, temples were built, priests were named to honor men turned divine, a religion that doubled as propaganda. Even with so many gods and rites, an even more down-to-earth power shaped a citizen's life: law, politics, and the absolute authority of the family's head. In ancient Rome, citizenship was a privilege, a badge of belonging, status, and power, but also a straitjacket of duties and limits few could break. Early on, Roman citizenship was a restricted right, reserved to free men born in Rome and certain families. Over time, reforms and conflicts widened access. In the 2nd century BC, the Gracchi tried to extend rights to Rome's Italian allies. Only with Caracalla's edict in AD 212 did nearly all free men in the empire become Roman citizens. Citizens could vote in assemblies, register in the census, serve in the army, and appeal to the courts. They also had duties: paying taxes, fulfilling military service, obeying the laws. In practice, the poorest held little political sway. Real power lay with the senatorial aristocracy, which controlled the Senate, magistracies, and administrative posts. The Republic called itself participatory, but Rome was above all an oligarchy with a popular facade. Inside the home, the same logic applied. The paterfamilias held total legal authority over everyone in the domus: wife, children, grandchildren, slaves, even dependents. He decided marriages, business, punishments, inheritances. In theory, he had the right to sell his children, reject a newborn, even apply the death penalty. In practice, as the empire advanced, many of these powers were softened by law and custom. Still, the paterfamilias remained the ultimate symbol of Roman order: firm, hierarchical, inflexible. The family model mirrored state values. Household discipline matched the army's. Obedience to the father matched obedience demanded by the emperor. The mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors, required each citizen to respect his social place, gender role, and fate. Living in Rome during its golden age meant diving into a daily paradox. On one hand, the most advanced city of the ancient world, aqueducts carrying water for dozens of kilometers, accessible public baths, written laws, monumental buildings, and a culture that would shape the entire West. On the other, a superpopulated metropolis where most lived in unstable buildings, slept in stifling cubicles, and shared a toilet with dozens of strangers. A city that produced art, poetry, and philosophy, but also stank of sewers, thrilled to mass executions, and allowed fathers to reject newborns. Knowing all this, let me ask you, would you have the courage to live in Rome 2,000 years ago? Tell me in the comments. We love reading your answers. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more content like this. turn on the bell, and share it with someone who loves history. And may Mars guide you in battle